Hello chaps, Paul Curran here. I hope you and all the listeners are well. Primo Michele Levi was born on July the 31st, 1919 in Turin, Italy. He was the first of two children born to middle-class Italian Jewish parents whose ancestors had immigrated to Italy centuries earlier to escape persecution during the Spanish Inquisition. Pursuing an education in chemistry, he flouted Mussolini's racial laws of 1938, which prohibited Jews from higher education. Levi received his Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Turin in 1941, amid the rise of fascism in his country. Arriving home after his father died in 1942, Levi discovered that conditions had worsened and that his mother and sister were hiding in the nearby hills to avoid persecution. In 1943, Levi and his family fled to northern Italy. He eventually landed a position in a pharmaceutical laboratory there, where he worked until the Germans invaded. Levi had joined an Italian resistance group, and when he and his comrades were arrested by fascist forces later that year, Levi admitted that he was a Jew to avoid being shot as a partisan, and he was sent to an Italian prison camp, Fossili, in January 1944. Fossili was then taken over by the Nazis, who started arranging the deportations of the Jews to eastern concentration and death camps. On the second of these transports, on the 21st of February 1944, Levi and other inmates were transported in 12 cramped cattle trucks to Monowitz, one of the three main camps in the Auschwitz concentration camp complex. Levi, number 1745517, spent 11 months there before the camp was liberated by the Red Army. Of the 650 Italian Jews in his transport, Levi was one of 20 who left the camps alive. The average life expectancy of a new entrant at the camp was 3 to 4 months. Levi knew some German from reading German publications on chemistry. He worked to orient quickly to life in the camp without attracting the attention of the privileged inmates. He used bread to pay a more experienced Italian prisoner for German lessons and orientation in Auschwitz. He was given a smuggled soup ration each day by Lorenzo Peroni, an Italian civilian bricklayer working there as a forced labourer. During this period, Peroni's physical and psychological health declined. Peroni's gesture saved Levi's life. Levi's professional qualifications were useful. In mid-November 1944, he secured a position as an assistant in IG Farben Werke laboratory that was intended to produce synthetic rubber. By avoiding hard labour in freezing outdoor temperatures, he was able to survive. Shortly before the camp was liberated by the Red Army, Levi fell ill with scarlet fever and was placed in the camp's sanatorium. On the 18th of January 1945, the SS hurriedly evacuated the camp as the Red Army approached, forcing all but the gravely ill on a long death march to a site further from the front. This resulted in the deaths of vast majority of the remaining prisoners. Levi's illness spared him from this fate. Although liberated in late January 1945, Levi did not reach Turin until the 19th of October 1945. In his memoir, Levi contrasted Lorenzo Peroni with everyone else in the camp, prisoners and guards alike, as someone who managed to preserve his humanity. After the war, Lorenzo could not cope with the memories of what he'd seen and descended into alcoholism. Levi made several trips to rescue his old friend from the streets, but in 1952, Peroni died. In 1950, having demonstrated his chemical talents back in Italy, Levi was promoted to technical director of the company SIVA. As SIVA's principal chemist and troubleshooter, Levi travelled abroad. He made several trips to Germany and carefully engineered his contacts with senior German businessmen and scientists. Wearing short-sleeved shirts, he made sure they saw his prison camp number tattooed on his arm. He became involved in organisations pledged to remembering and recording the horror of the camps. In 1954, he visited Birkenwald to mark the 9th anniversary of the camp's liberation from the Nazis. Levi dutifully attended many such anniversary events over the years and recounted his own experiences. In July 1957, his son, Renzo, was born, almost certainly named after his saviour, Lorenzo Perrone. Primo Levi was the author of novels, collections of short stories, essays and poems. His best-known works include If This Is a Man, published in 1947. This was published as Survival in Auschwitz in the United States, and was his account of the year he spent there as a prisoner in Poland, and The Periodic Table of 1975, linked to qualities of the elements, which the Royal Institution of Great Britain named the best science book ever written. Primo Levi died on the 11th of April 1987 after a fall from the interior landing of his third-story apartment in Turin to the ground floor below. The coroner ruled his death as suicide. Three of his biographers, Angier, Thompson and Anisimov, agreed. In his later life, Levi indicated that he was suffering from depression. Factors likely included responsibility for his elderly mother and mother-in-law with whom he was living, and lingering traumatic memories of his experiences. The Nobel laureate and Holocaust survivor, Elie Wiesel, said at the time, Primo Levi died at Auschwitz 40 years later. Several of Levi's friends and associates have argued otherwise. The Oxford sociologist Diego Gambetta noted that Levi left no suicide note, nor any other indication that he was considering suicide. Documents and testimony suggested that he had plans for both the short and longer term at the time. After visiting the apartment complex, Gambetta suggested that Levi lost his balance and fell accidentally, as he had complained to his physician of dizziness in the days before his death. The Nobel laureate, Rita Levi Montalcini, a close friend of Levi, agreed. As a chemical engineer, she said, he might have chosen a better way of exiting the world than jumping into a narrow stairwell with the risk of remaining paralyzed. All translations were completed under Levi's close supervision. He was particularly careful to oversee the German translation, writing in The Drowned and the Saved, I did not trust my German publisher. I wrote him an almost insolent letter. I warned him not to remove or change a single word in the text, and I insisted that he send me the manuscript of the translation in batches. I wanted to check on not merely its lexical, but also its inner faithfulness. Robert S.C. Gordon writes that Levi went on to develop a close relationship with his publisher, Reit. The German edition contains a special preface addressed to the German people, which Levi said he wrote out of passionate necessity to remind them what they had done. Levi visited over 130 schools to talk about his experiences in Auschwitz. He was shocked by revisionist attitudes that tried to rewrite the history of the camps as less horrific, what is now referred to as Holocaust denial. His view was that the Nazi death camps and the attempted annihilation of the Jews was a horror unique in history, because the goal was the complete destruction of a race by one that saw itself as superior. He noted that it was highly organized and mechanized. It entailed the degradation of Jews to the point of using their ashes as materials for paths. On the 27th of January 1945, Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi concentration and death camp, was liberated by the Red Army. Holocaust Memorial Day has been observed every 27th of January since 2001 in the United Kingdom and in Italy. Some of Primo Levi's notable quotes are, "The aims of life are the best defense against death. I too entered the Lagerfeld camp, as a non-believer, and as a non-believer I was liberated and have lived to this day." In 1986, his book, Se Merci e Salvati, The Drowned and the Saved, was published. In it, he tried to analyse why people behaved the way they did at Auschwitz, and why some survived whilst others perished. In his typical style, he makes no judgments, but presents the evidence and asks the questions. For example, one essay examines what he calls the grey zone, those Jews who did the Germans' dirty work for them and kept the rest of the prisoners in line. He questioned, What made a concert violinist behave as a callous taskmaster? From that work, The Drowned and the Saved. Monsters exist, but they are too few in number to be truly dangerous. More dangerous are the common men, the functionaries ready to believe and to act without asking questions. Levi introduces his Holocaust memoir, If This Is a Man, with the poem Shema. Shema is Hebrew text consisting of 3 passages from the Pentateuch and beginning, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. It forms an important part of Jewish evening and morning prayer and is used as a Jewish confession of faith. The first verse of the Shema from the 6th chapter of Deuteronomy is among the best known in all of Jewish liturgy. It is recited at the climactic moment of the final prayer of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, and traditionally as the last words before death. Translated by Ruth Feldman and Brian Swan, this is Shema by Primo Levi. You who live secure in your warm houses, who return at evening to find hot food and friendly faces, consider whether this is a man who labors in the mud, who knows no peace, who fights for a crust of bread, who dies at a yes or a no. Consider whether this is a woman without hair or name, with no more strength to remember, eyes empty, and womb cold as a frog in winter. Consider that this has been. I commend these words to you. Engrave them on your hearts. When you are in your house, when you walk on your way, when you go to bed, when you rise. Repeat them to your children. Or may your house crumble, disease render you powerless. Your offspring avert their faces from you.